in 1979. I was 14 years old, attending Manchester Junior High School. I had the love and support of many family and friends. I was a good student. I was student body president. I had a lot of things to be happy about. So why was it on this one Friday night at a junior high school dance, was I sitting alone in a hallway full of lockers, crying uncontrollably with a headache that wouldn't go away? My 47-year-old self has a lot in common with that 14-year-old self. And I've got the loving, supportive family and friends here today. Instead of a student, I'm now teaching at the Kelley School of Business, and I'm currently the president of the Bloomington City Council. And I still have those headaches. What I want to talk to you about today are what's happened over those intervening 33 years, and how really the transformative power of talk helped me understand and how to manage living with depression, and how through that power of talk, it's helped others as well. Now go back to my 14-year-old self sitting in that hallway. All I had and understood was the physiological symptoms that were going on in my body. And then after going to doctors and having tests, I learned a vocabulary of headaches, cluster headaches, migraines, and that's the prism from which I saw my world. But over 5 years later, sitting in a college classroom, an introductory to psychology classroom, a professor put a transparency on the overhead and started unveiling a list. And I saw myself in those words. And that was a list of the symptoms of depression. So suddenly, I've got a vocabulary from which I can better understand my life up to that moment, but unfortunately, it was a vocabulary I couldn't use. Because I was a young male, brought up in a culture that was taught that if you express emotion, if you express feeling, and certainly if you express that you have depression, it's an expression of vulnerability that's treated as weakness, it's treated as a stigma. And I built up a wall of silence, and I'd never used that vocabulary. But you know, that wall helped me over the subsequent 20 years, because I was able to wall off those cycles of depression, but I could step out in front of that wall and put on a performance that's allowed me to graduate from college, go to grad school, get married, get a job, get a divorce, finish grad school, get remarried, and live a wonderful life here in Bloomington. But there's a point in time when everything that's going on behind that wall is going to break. And my break happened about 10 years ago. All of those cycles were going on. The pressures of jobs. I took on a new job hosting a daily talk radio show, and I had family, financial pressures, security pressures, all of those things, and it created a moment where I entered a depressive cycle that I didn't know I had entered. And I was at the bottom. Let me tell you what that bottom feels like, because it's a toxic mess of blackness. Your body feels heavy, like you can't move. Your brain feels like it's full of mud, and you're trying to think of ideas and express words, and they just won't come. You're walking through life, and you feel like you want to cry, but you have no idea why. And in that process, I put on 70 pounds because of the apathy and that had gone on because of that depression. Now, I was able to perform out in front of that wall, and I performed in front of many of you. And you didn't know what was going on with these cycles that I was at the bottom of. And I was performing for you. And that performance took a lot of energy to be on. And when I went home, I told my family I needed to decompress. What I was really saying is, I need to shut down. And I'd walk up the stairs, I'd either go to my bedroom or I'd go to my office, and I'd shut the door, and I was literally shutting out my family and my friends. And I did that for 3 years. Now, I don't know what it was that triggered the moment that I decided to talk, but I talked. I went to my doctor, and I started to talk to him, and he asked me a question that I almost got out of, because he said, "Have you ever been diagnosed with depression?" And what went through my brain was, diagnosed? No. But I talked. I started telling him all of my feelings, all of my experiences, and I started to unload, and I started to tell him my fear and stigma, and I said, look, I'm scared that this is going to go on my medical record, it's going to affect my insurance rates, it's going to affect my ability to get a job, and at that moment, he said, stop. And what he said next literally saved my life. He said, Darryl, it's genetics. Just like you're 6'2", you've got brown eyes, you're bald, the neurons in your brain aren't firing correctly, and they need help. You just need to be willing to take it. And in that moment, my world changed. I saw depression differently. It wasn't a flaw. It wasn't a weakness. It wasn't something to be judged. I learned that depression just is. And through talk with my doctors, developed a strategy that included talk. It included med management. And it included a change of diet where now I'm largely a vegan lifestyle, eating leafy greens, fruits and vegetables, and a commitment to exercise. Those 4 things helped me. And in that process, I started to learn to listen to my body. And I can tell when a depressive cycle is going to start. And it starts with that headache. It begins right here. The difference between those 33 years, and actually I'd say the difference in the last 7 years, is that I know when a cycle begins that everything's going to be okay when I come out the other side. And that power of talk helped me realize that maybe talking to others about my story may help them. And I took a risk and decided to do a radio program about mental health issues. We scheduled Jane Pauley to come on to talk about bipolar disorders. We talked to one of the owners of the Houston Texans to talk about his life as an oil executive living with depression. And I brought my doctors on, and we talked about my case. Now, you know talk radio, right? You go to the phones, it's antagonistic, it's debate, and you never know what you're going to get. But what happened was nothing short of miraculous. Because when we went to the phones, we started to hear people that I used to debate with telling their stories. They were talking about their mothers, their friends, their brothers, their sisters, their successes, their failures. And what was even more powerful to me were the moment when people were calling in and they were saying that they were viewing depression differently because of the narratives that other people were sharing. Now, that's why I'm here today. Because this is the second time that I've told my story publicly. And my hope is that this story will help others in several ways. And one is that, look, I represent 1 in 4 men who will suffer from clinical depression in their lifetime. But I'm a lucky one because only 20% of people suffering from depression will ever seek help. Those other 80%, they won't seek help because the stigma still lives. There's no better example than when I told people that I was going to do this TED Talk, that they said, Darryl, you're an elected official. What if your constituents here? Darryl, you're a teacher. What if your students here? And I said, let them listen. Because my hope is, as they listen, they may change their view of what depression is. That people living with depression can be successful family members, can be successful in their career, can be successful in their community. It's just part of who they are. My hope is that if they are listening, they may recognize the narrative in their own story, and they'll start talking and getting the help that they need. But here's my challenge to you. As they start talking, I hope you'll listen. Thank you very much.